Mr. Mahadev, Mr. Y.V. Raman, and Dr. Sundar Balaji, Mr. Radhakrishna Murthy for this webinar. Over to Mahadev, sir.
Mr. Radhakrishna Murthy, welcome address by Radhakrishna Murthy.
Yeah,
please.
Good evening, friends and everyone. I would like to extend my warm and welcome to one and all, and the managing committee members also. I feel happy to see your continuous support and delight to meet you all in this webinar forum. The IPI Chennai chapter is intended to do services towards the industry. Would like to do it for you and your support, with your support. I hope you too will support us. Today we are going to see the second part of the last week lecture, value proposition and the market drivers for bio-based and compostable plastics. I hope you have benefited in the last session. Let me see today's lecture also. This is the right time to explore these technologies and for the benefit of each and every members who are all attending this webinar. Now, I welcome our speaker, Dr. Sundar Balakrishnan, Director, Nature Tech India Private Limited. With your permission, I invite D. Balaji, Joint Secretary of IPI Chennai chapter, to introduce our today's speaker. Welcome, Mr. Balaji. Please introduce Mr. Sundar Balakrishnan. Thank you.
Sir, Mr. Balaji is not there. You can yourself make an introduction.
Yeah. Mr. Sundar Balakrishnan is MD of Nature Tech, Director of Nature Tech India Private Limited, and is having vast knowledge in the biopolymers. And last week you have saw the lot of inputs and in-depth details about the biopolymers. Now this session you are going to listen remaining session of the biopolymers. I request sir to take care of to start working his presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Okay. So I would like to first of all thank IPI once again for giving this opportunity, and thank you for creating this environment where knowledge can be shared, and it's really beneficial for everyone. So we are really grateful to IPI and everyone in the IPI committee for this opportunity. So last week in the presentation, we saw some basics of bioplastics, what was bio-based, and we stopped here at this point of biodegradability. So I'm going to start from here. So what does biodegradability mean? What biodegradability means is, can the microorganisms in the target disposal system, it could be composting, soil, or anaerobic digester, assimilate or utilize the carbon substrate as a food source completely and in a defined time period. And we saw that from the basic polymer chains through different environments, could be soil, compost, wastewater, or aquatic environment, there are several mechanisms of degradation which occur. It could be hydrolytic, oxidative, or enzymatic, to break down these polymer fragments into oligomers, which is, oligomer means it's a lower molecular weight polymer. So you require several oligomer chains to form a polymer. And once it gets broken down to an oligomer, from this phase, do the microorganisms in each of this environment completely assimilate the carbon and convert it into carbon dioxide, water, and cell biomass. This is termed as complete biodegradability. Now, here is very important to understand that if a polymer mechanism of degradation stops in this oligomeric stage, that cannot be construed as fully biodegradable. Although this stage could be invisible to a human eyesight, we cannot construe this until there is microbial assimilation. And how do you track microbial assimilation? You track it by evolution of carbon dioxide. So the evolution of carbon dioxide is a direct measure of the biodegradation of the polymer. Now, from the polymer to the oligomer, it is more of a physical degradation. When the molecular weight drops, that is a physical degradation. But when the carbon gets converted to carbon dioxide, it is a biological degradation. So this is the difference, very important to understand, between physical degradation and what is truly biological. And only if all these residues are consumed by the microorganisms as a food and energy source. And how do you know this? This is known by the evolved carbon dioxide in a defined time frame and in a defined disposal environment. You can call something as completely biodegradable. So this is a basic concept of biodegradability. Okay. Now, what do you mean by compostable? Now, we have seen all these words which are floating around in the market. Some people call it oxo-biodegradable. You must have heard of the term photo-biodegradable, enzyme degradable, degradable, biocompostable. So there's a lot of confusion, misinformation, misrepresentation. Now, when you talk of compostability is nothing but a complete microbial assimilation of the product in composting as a disposal environment. Now, when you talk of composting as a disposal environment, what we mean is that composting is a mechanism of treating any organic waste. It could be vegetable waste, food waste, paper, green waste, lawn waste. It is a mechanism by which this organic waste gets converted into value-added manure, and this process is called composting. So any material which integrates with this process and is consumed by the microorganisms in that composting environment as a food source, you call it as compostable, and this has to happen within 180 days. So there is a standard which I will be talking in the next slides. I'll talk a little bit about what that standard essentially is exactly. Okay. Now this is just a very pictorial representation of biodegradation and composting. And as you can see, essentially when you have fragmentation, this is the initial framework of any plastic or bioplastic degradation. Is the first thing is the material will fragment. Now, it's very important that in the presence of moisture, heat, and time, this fragmented material gets completely converted into manure. This is just a pictorial representation of the entire compostability process. So now if we were to make it a little bit more easy to understand, look at fragmentation as the biggest circle. So materials in the fragmentation process, materials break down into smaller pieces, and these small pieces maintain the properties of the original material and will not break down further on their own. So what this means is, if you take a material, it is now broken down, and this broken down fragment is not going to break down further on its own. It is, so this entire big circle is called as fragmentation. Now within the fragmentation subset is we have what is called as biodegradation. Now what does biodegradation mean? Materials, so the fragmented materials are then first broken down into smaller pieces by natural process and get converted into further broken down fragments. So from fragmentation, you have a biodegradation. And then comes a further subset, which is compostability, where these materials, which are biodegradable, are further completely assimilated by the microorganisms in a composting facility in 180 days or less to convert all the carbon in the material to carbon dioxide, water, and humic material. This process is compostability. So if you have to understand it in a very simple way, fragmentation is a large pie of which the subset is biodegradation, and then the final complete microbial assimilation comes under composting. So this is a more simpler way to break down the three stages. Now coming to certifications, I had mentioned about this in the last lecture as well. We have ASTM D6400, which is a US certification, and the standard is ASTM D6400. The certificate is given by the Biodegradable Products Institute, BPI, in the US. The same or equivalent certification to ASTM D6400 is EN 13432, which is a Europe-based certification, and this is given by TUV Austria. And we have an AS 4736, which is the Australian Bioplastic Association, ABA, and ISO 17088 is a combination of, or it is like a mother certification which encompasses most of the components in all these certifications. Now in India, the Indian government follows a standard called ISO 17088, which is very similar to ISO 17088. So the Indian government follows this norm. Now, what encompasses this certification? What are the key points? There are essentially three basic components. The first one is called biodegradation or mineralization, which means in no more than 180 days, 90% of the organic carbon must be utilized by the microorganisms to form carbon dioxide when compared to a positive control of cellulose. This is the first stage in the standard. The second point in the standard is a disintegration, which means after 12 weeks, no more than 10% of the product's original dry weight should remain after sieving on a 2 millimeter sieve. So what this, essentially the reason they put this is, let us say you take something like an aluminum foil. Now an aluminum foil contains no carbon. So which means you will meet the mineralization methodology, because the mineralization or this first step is only for the carbon content in the material. So, but the reason they also put in the disintegration is so that if does the material get assimilated into a form which is non-distinguishable, or does it keep lying out in patches? So this is what the disintegration test does. If you have, let us say, a metallized substructure, let's say like a metallized film, or an aluminum foil laminated with a compostable film, does the product get disintegrated after sieving on a 2 millimeter sieve? You should not have more than 10%. So this is the second component in the standard. And the third and important component is there should be no adverse impact on the ability of the compost made from the product which is biodegraded to support plant growth. What we mean by this is there is heavy metal criteria. Heavy metal in the product should be less than 50%, and then there is a germination rate which has to be compared. So there is a test where they grow a plant. It's called a plant toxicity test, where they grow plants made from regular compost and compost made from this material, and there should be no adverse impact. So these are the three main areas of standards, which is today there. And typically, compostable products integrate very well with zero waste initiatives. So what do we mean by zero waste initiatives? So fundamentally, composting as an infrastructure was created not to handle plastics. It was mainly created to handle food waste and organic waste. So the way initially people used to get all this food waste in plastic bags, and composting, which is an industry by itself, the composters had to understand, now what do we do with this plastic once I put the food waste into the composting setup? So there were two challenges. One, what do I need to do? What do I do with the plastic? The second, there was also a certain hygiene issue in handling the food waste. No one likes to, at a garbage dump yard, no one likes to take the plastic bag, dump the food waste out and throw the plastic bag. So now there is a hygiene issue. This is what instigated the industry to create products which are also compostable and which compost at the same rates as conventional food waste. So this is where compostable liner bags came into existence. And compostable liner bags could be used to collect all the organic waste and directly put it into composting. So that way you need not have to separate the food waste from the bag. And second, you don't need to worry about how do you dispose of the bag, because it's going to get composted in the same rates. So compostable plastics came into existence not because of an issue in plastics, it is only because they aid better in organic waste diversion, which means when we use a compostable plastic to collect all the organic waste, it helps in improving efficiencies of collection and efficiency of conversion into compost. If this were not to happen, then some part of this material would either end up in a landfill, or it could be, let's say, incinerated, or it could just be thrown out, which is not a good medium for disposal. So compostable bags are a medium for zero waste solutions. Then what happened is, once people started using compostable bags, that is the time when the quick service restaurant culture started increasing a lot. So people, restaurants like chains like McDonald's, Starbucks, all these or Domino's, Pizza Hut, they started coming into the picture, and they were using a lot of plastics like forks, knives, spoons, paper cups, plates, which were all in contact with food waste, food, right? So the moment a plastic is contaminated with food, then the challenge is you can neither recycle it as food, nor can you recycle it as a plastic, or you'll have to clean the food waste, so that involves a lot of energy consumption in the process of cleaning it. So then the industry said, can we develop products which are like plastic, which have the functionality of a plastic, which is wet strength, performance, lightweight, but at the same time can compost like a food waste. And that is when this whole industry started to come in. The reason I'm bringing this out is it's important to understand that compostable plastics integrate into these zero waste initiatives and add a functionally enhanced value to the zero waste program, which is extremely important. So this is one important point I would like to bring here. Now, typically, compostable or biodegradable plastics represents the end of life, and unqualified use of this term biodegradable is wrong, misleading, and deceptive. So you cannot use the word biodegradable just like that, because that creates a lot of misconceptions or misinformation in the market. Second, as I told you in the last week talk, not all bio-based plastics are biodegradable. End of life can be recycling as well. It need not be only compostability. Third, marine and litter are not responsible end of life options. So just because something is biodegradable or compostable does not mean we can throw it as a litter or we can dump it into the seas and oceans, because it will not compost or biodegrade in those conditions. That is another important point. And composting, anaerobic digestion, or in certain cases, people are now starting to work on biodegradation in soil, which is for plasticulture. They are responsible end of life options. And then we have zero waste solutions, which is essentially the diversion of the waste from the landfill into a composting infrastructure. Now, unqualified claims for items entering the solid waste stream should be substantiated with scientific evidence that the entire item will fully decompose. There are lots of reports that are in the market where people talk about, let's say they run the study for 15 days and they say that 10% or 20% of my material is biodegraded, and so in the next 180 days 90% would be biodegraded. So they do an extrapolation which is not correct. So we cannot extrapolate a microbial assimilation mechanism because it's not a linear mechanism. The way microbes consume food source or consume the carbon in the food source is a completely different mechanism. It cannot be plotted in a certain pattern. It cannot be a linear pattern or a parabolic pattern or an exponential pattern. That's one. Second, using landfills and saying that my material would eventually biodegrade in a landfill or in a recycling, are making those claims are deceptive, because these locations do not present conditions in which complete biodegradation will occur. In fact, a landfill is a very poor repository for any biodegradation because the conditions are very anaerobic. There is no oxygen, and so whatever happens in a landfill, it's very slow, it takes a long time, and it continues to remain in a landfill. I mean, there have been cases where lot of instances of materials having been in landfills for several years and not changed their shape, size, or anything. So that's the second point. The final point is the phrase fully decompose into elements found in nature equates to a complete abiotic or biotic breakdown of the plastic into carbon dioxide, water, and biomass, which is what is needed or required from a scientific perspective to show that our material gets completely biodegraded into carbon dioxide, water, and biomass is a very important step in this whole biodegradation process. Now, there are some technologies, what we call as additive technologies. Sometimes there are cases where certain additives, it could be either an enzymatic additive or it could be a regular heavy metal or a regulated metal additive, which is made as a master batch and added at 1% or 2% levels into plastics to create oxo-degradable or photodegradable or enzyme degradable products. Now, there is nothing different in these technologies. The chemistry or the science behind an additive technology is very simple. The additive essentially breaks down the polymer chain and reduces the molecular weight of the polymer. So if you are starting with, let us say, a molecular weight of 100,000 or 150,000, once you put in the additive in the presence of sunlight, the additives could be simply radical initiators, which can start creating radical groups within the polymer and hence breaking down the chain into molecular weights of maybe 15,000 or 10,000. So to a layman, these bags or these products would look as if it is breaking down. But these oligomeric fragments continue to remain in the environment because the fundamental chemistry of the polymer, if it is polyethylene, the fundamental chemistry of the polymer does not change because of this additive. The additive only physically breaks it down and does not break it down biologically. So this is one important point. So these products are promoting these products under the name of biodegradable or fully biodegradable is misleading. So here is some pictures of what happens when some of these bags end up in a composting facility. You can see that oxo-degradable bags, they don't compost and they create a lot of litter within the composting facility. And they also break down into such small fragments that these broken down fragments are now very difficult to collect. So let's imagine you have a PET bottle on the road. Now, if it stays as a PET bottle, it's easier to collect. But then if this PET bottle becomes small fragments, then it becomes very difficult to collect, to recycle. So from one product, which is potentially recyclable, which is the plastic, by using oxo-degradable technologies, it gets converted into a product which now cannot be recycled and which creates a completely different set of challenges to manage. There are several cases captured by scientists, researchers across the world of a lot of marine population using or thinking that these fragmented plastics and consuming it as a food source. So this is another challenge which is there. And these are essentially some pictures of these kind of microplastics which are consumed by some of the marine organisms, and thinking that this is a food because it's now so small, and then if humans start eating some of those fishes or whatever sea creatures, then that starts getting transported up the food chain, which creates a lot of challenges. Now here is another case I wanted to just explain on some of the biodegradability claims which are made inappropriately. So this is in 2002, this was a paper written in the Chemical Communications where they said a hypothesis was developed and successfully tested to increase the rates of biodegradation of polyolefins. And what they did was they took the polyolefin molecule, they grafted sugar, and when they did the biodegradation study, they found only a weight loss of only 2 to 12%. which means only the sugar was getting assimilated, the polyethylene chain was intact. And when the press heard about it, they made it a really sensational news by saying sugar turns plastic biodegradable, bacteria make a meal of sweetened polyethylene and polystyrene, which has now suddenly presented a completely different picture. Yes, there was a breakdown, but it was only the sugar grafted centers which broke down. The polyethylene chain remained intact, which is how it should be. So this is another misinformation, misclaim in the market, which has been more sensationalized because of the press. Similarly, there are claims which says that this material will completely 100% in soil compost oxo biodegrade in 9 months to 5 years. So when someone says 9 months to 5 years, then it means that there is no standard, and this is a problem. That is why in the test requirement for compostability, there is a clear statement that if the carbon in the material does not get converted to carbon dioxide in less than 180 days, then you can't call that as compostable. So sometimes these claims saying that over 10 years this will biodegrade, or over 15 years, or over 5 years it will biodegrade, is extremely misleading, and I would really throw a lot of caution into some of these claims. Now, we spoke about this. Bio-based is not the same as compostable. So bio-based refers to the beginning of life, which is the source of the carbon coming in the raw material, and then biodegradable or compostable refers to the end of life. So in this case, you can see you have TUV Austria, which offers an OK bio-based logo. You have a USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, which offers a certified bio-based product. And here is an example. Last time we discussed about Coca-Cola, where they use up to 30% plant bio-based materials. So bio-based is not the same as compostable. Now, having seen about the differences between bio-based and compostable, let's look at some of the drivers for sustainable packaging solutions. So there are essentially 3 drivers for some of these sustainable packaging solutions. The first is a legislative driver. What we mean by a legislative driver is that there is a national policy that requires, mandates diversion from landfill into managed end-of-life disposal systems. This is a legislative driver. The second is a corporate culture, where several corporations today and other private entities, they have a strong focus on environmental stewardship and recognize their desire for sustainable products and programs. For example, brands like Unilever, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, these brands have already taken commitments to move into bioplastics or carbon footprint reduction based technologies or end-of-life technologies. It need not be just composting, it could be recycling, it could be marine, it could be anaerobic, but there is a certain drive because this is more coming from a corporate standpoint. And the third driver is ultimately the consumer or the customer. And today consumers are more knowledgeable, they are more aware, and they demand that products that they buy need to be coming from a source which is sustainable, which requires sustainable packaging, and the technologies that used are sustainable, such as LEED, for example. So there are different drivers for a sustainable packaging solution. Now, when you look at packaging in the waste stream, essentially you have about a certain technology where, let's say, there is a process of recycling, some product of it goes for landfilling, there is also some leakage into the environment, and a part of it also goes for incineration or recovery of energy. And so far, we have been working in the model of what we call as a linear packaging model, where there is a production and the product is made, it is then consumed and disposed. So this is the linear model by which the economy is running right now, from production to disposal. And the way we would like to create a model is create a circular model where we source the material. So here we have two options. We could use a petroleum feedstock or a fossil-based feedstock to source, or we could use a renewable feedstock to source. Now this material, the feedstock which is sourced, is then used for production. We make the product, we use the product, and then we have now several options. How to create circularity? One, you can reuse it. We can reuse it. Number two, we can recycle it. So either we can recycle it back to the same product, or we can recycle it back to the source. Third is we can compost it. By doing this process, we are creating an effective after-use plastics economy, number one. Number two, we are drastically reducing the leakage of plastics into other natural systems. The reason today the challenge with plastics is because, not because plastics are bad, it's just because plastics are getting leaked into systems which are very visible. So they are probably, everyone is thinking that the entire problem is because of plastics. No, plastics are only getting that label because of this leakage. And by doing this recycling, reuse and composting, we can reduce the leakage, which will enhance the image of this whole industry. And third is, we have to decouple plastics from fossilized feedstocks. This is very important. Today, polyethylene is formed by cracking of petroleum. But the same polyethylene can also be created using ethylene from any biological feedstock or a renewable feedstock. Of course, there are energy requirements that need to be considered. Today, probably getting ethylene from a petroleum feedstock is still the lowest cost option and the most efficient option. But then once we decouple the feedstock, then that provides more options to say, where is my ethylene going to come from? Is it going to come from a petroleum feedstock, or is it going to come from a renewable feedstock? Then you come back into this cycle to say, okay, I choose my feedstock and I produce what I want to produce. I use it, I either reuse it, recycle it, compost it, dispose it, but then I reduce the leakage. We are creating circularity. So the goal is, we have to move from a linear economy to a circular economy. And this is exactly what this summarizes. So when we talk about linear economy, I would like to again reiterate, from raw material, you make a product, you service, you provide it, you package it, you use it, you dispose it. And then at every point we can get circularity. For example, once we use it, reuse it. When we dispose it, recycle it. When we dispose it, regrind and use it. These are all mechanical or chemical ways of recycling. And then we have biological ways. From use it, you reuse it. If you want to dispose it, compost it. Once you compost it, you apply back the compost, you get the feedstock back, you use the product. So essentially the concept, and this is where most brands and most economies are going to move into creating circularity. I think there are several ways by which we can create circularity in the ecosystem. Uh, Bioplastics is one of them. It's not the only way. You could do it with conventional plastics. If we effectively recycle, if we effectively even regrind and use it, is a beautiful way to create circularity. So this point is very important, that essentially whatever we try to do, if we can build the concept of circularity around it, I think to a great extent, the challenges with single-use disposable materials as a whole could be brought down significantly. And this is where the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is talking about the new plastics economy, where they are saying that eliminate unnecessary packaging is one first goal. Second is innovate to ensure 100% can be easily used, reused, recycled, or composted. And third, circulate the plastic by significantly increasing the amount of reused or recycled content. So this is where several customers or brands right now are looking at how do we add more recycled content into a product. So this adds value, that when we add more recycled content, we create more circularity. Now, I would like to just spend a little bit of time, and I think we are almost coming to the end, but I would like to talk a little bit about biopolymers in the market for those of you who are new in this area. As we now spoke about, there are two categories, bio-based and biodegradable. Typically, when you look at bio-based polymers, you have bio-based polyethylene, PET, polyamide, polypropylene, and by 2023, there is about 1.3 million tons of bio-based polymers, which are predicted to be available at commercial scale. And then when we talk of biodegradable polymers, we have very commonly used biodegradable polymers, which is PBAT, polybutylene adipate co-terephthalate, polybutylene succinate, polylactic acid, polyhydroxyalkanoate, starch, some of the other materials, which is also touted to be around 1,300 tons. So essentially the market is 1.3 million tons of both each of these materials. So the market is accepting both bio-based and biodegradable plastics depending on the application. If you are looking at a single-use disposable packaging, then ensuring that the biodegradability functionality is a part of that is important. While if you're looking at a more durable application, then having the material bio-based is important, because then you can create value by saying that I have moved away X% of my petroleum-based feedstock into a more renewable-based feedstock. So this is the value. And then this is a case where we saw last time as well of Coca-Cola. And what Coca-Cola has done is they have created this bottle, Dasani water bottle with a green cap, which is the same PET molecule, but then the ethylene glycol component, the carbon in the ethylene glycol component is coming from a bio-based feedstock. And then the value messaging that they are putting out is they save about 17 million metric tons of carbon dioxide from the environment by switching these two carbons from a petroleum-based feedstock to a renewable-based feedstock. So this is one brand which is doing globally, switching from a petroleum feedstock to a bio feedstock. And the end of life for this bottle is still recycling, because it is the same PET molecule which is coming from a same PET. So typically this ethylene glycol, while it comes from a petroleum resource, it is now coming from a bio-based, but the molecule of PET has not changed. it is still the same PET molecule. So it's important that this bottle, while it is bio-based, it is still end of life. It is not biodegradable or compostable. It is only recyclable, similar to PET. And this is that by 2020, they have made an assurance that most bottles that Coca-Cola makes and all their brands will be converted to plant bottles. I want to quickly go over some of the other areas. Ford has done some work on bio-based materials. They have worked on soybean oil-based technologies for car seating foam production. There are several food packaging applications which have come out in the world in bioplastics today. Transparent, biaxially oriented PLA films for packaging sandwiches. We have PLA coated paper cups for cold cups and hot cups for coffee and other beverages. Compostable laminate packing. This is a 3-layer laminate with paper, foil, and a compostable film which is used for packing wafers and chips. This is a thermoformed form fill and sealed container with which Danone launched for some of their dairy products. Some industrial applications for packaging of industrial products like water purifiers and other things. These are some applications for bus seat covers. Lot of applications in the hospitality industry. These are more pretty common applications: carry-out bags, liner bags, bin bags, shirt bags, some of these applications that we see. Hybrid product applications like shampoo sachets, soap covers, some of these plates which are compostable are also coming out in the market. And a lot of work has gone in composting development. So this is a case of, this is one facility that I had the opportunity to be a part of the construction. This is a Godrej facility in Chennai, and they were able to construct, so this is the picture. They were able to construct this facility to manage all their food waste and other waste. So it was a very interesting development here. And then we have all these liner bags and some of this composting carry bags. So this is a kind of a nutshell on what I wanted to really bring out. And and maybe I can, if it's okay, can I just talk a few slides about NatureTech? Would that be fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So essentially, so NatureTech, we are a part of a global organization called Northern Technologies International Corporation, called NTIC. We were founded in 1970, and we have 3 businesses that we operate. The first 2 businesses are branded as Zerust, which is in the area of industrial packaging and oil and gas, and then NatureTech, which is into bio-based and compostable plastics. And at NatureTech, we do several solutions. We are into garment packaging solutions. We are into zero waste solutions like liners, shopper bags, cutlery, gloves, straws. We also do performance compounds, which are bio-based and compostable compounds tailored for certain specific applications. We have several compounds. Our products are certified with BPI and TUV Austria. We have film extrusion, profile extrusion, injection molding, and I mentioned integrated into zero waste products. We are again focused on innovation. We have a R&D team in the US and in worldwide, which is working on product innovation. We also have a collaboration with Michigan State University for research on advanced bio-based materials. We also have facilities in India, China, Malaysia, and Italy for finished product manufacturing. Yeah. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Dr. Sundar, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we have a few questions lined up for you.
Yeah. Sure.
The biodegradable is depend on the rate of degradation. How the time of 180 days and 90% is justified?
Okay. So the reason the 180 days and 90%. So first I'll talk about the 180 days. Now the 180 days is essentially came out because that refers to one growing season of the crop. So typically when you see a crop, right, when you plant and when it grows and it seeds and comes back, that growing season is anywhere between 150 to 250. So the average is about 180 days. Because anything, if it does not go, or to put it alternatively, if it continues to stay in the environment for a very long period of time, then the potential harm it could cause cannot be justified. So that's one reason why that 180 days came in. Now, why 90% and why not 100%? Theoretically, it should be 100%. So just because it says 90% does not mean you can add 10% of conventional plastics into this supply chain, into the product. The reason I give that 90% is when you do the testing, there is a certain standard deviation which has to be accounted for. If I do the testing, I might get 93%, and if someone else does the testing, they might get 92%. So just to make sure that 10% is only to cover for the standard deviations. In fact, one point in the test methodology, which I did not mention, but since this question has been asked, I will now mention it. When you do the testing, you have to declare all the components of your raw material. And you also have to declare if any component is added at a level which is greater than 1%, then it is important to show that individually that component is fully compliant with the standard. So in the case of a plastic, if someone were to say, I will add 10% plastic and still meet the 90%, it would not work, because now if you have added it at more than 1%, then that individual material has to meet the standard by itself. So I hope I answered this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir. The next question is, what is the methodology for manufacturing the biopolymer in industry?
So when you talk of methodology, is it, I mean, I just want to understand, is this related to the base biopolymer, or is it related to taking the biopolymer and making a product?
You can take it as a base biopolymer.
Yeah. So if it is a base biopolymer, like let us say polylactic acid, it is like any other biochemical process. The way polylactic acid is made is they basically take lactic acid and it gets polymerized into polylactic acid. So right from the process of, if, for example, if it's NatureWorks, they use corn as a feedstock. So from corn, they ferment it, they get lactate. From there, they get lactic acid. This lactic acid gets converted to polylactic acid. So any sugar source, you need a sugar source to be able to make lactic acid. For NatureWorks, it's corn because it's the lowest available feedstock. If you look at some other company, they could use cassava starch. For some other company, it could be some other source. So depending on the economics of what drives the feedstock availability in a certain geography would determine what feedstock we use. And then there is a certain chemistry that happens from converting that feedstock into a sugar molecule, because the starting point of any material is sugar, and from sugar it gets converted to lactic acid. From there it's polymerized.
Okay, sir. The question is that nowadays the pack of the water or the cool drinks, that biodegradable plastic has been used in the market. So why it is not degrading when it touches the water, or else where it is degrading the lifespan of the time when we throw it in the waste and the landfill?
Yes, and some of these products are wrongly labeled as biodegradable. So if it is, as I mentioned, if it is just an additive technology which is used in conventional plastics, then those materials would not biodegrade. So that is one. Now, assuming that they are truly compostable plastics, then when it touches water, of course, there is a certain wet strength resistance that the polymer has. So beyond a certain point, it would affect the shelf life of the polymer. But once the water has been used, then if you just throw it out, it is not going to biodegrade. It has to be sent into a municipal composting facility for it to completely biodegrade.
Thank you, sir. Is the bio-based material compatible with PE? Whether biodegradable material can be mixed with PE? If yes, what will be the life of the mixed material for degrading?
I would not recommend mixing biodegradable materials with PE because they are completely two different chemistries. So my suggestion is it would be better if we don't mix it, because if you mix a PE with a regular biodegradable material, then one is beyond a certain point you cannot mix it because they would phase separate. And even if you try to mix it, the properties would be really poor because there would be no bonding between the two. One is a hydrophilic substrate and the other one is a hydrophobic substrate. So unless we do certain chemistries around it, it will be difficult to make it miscible.
Thank you, sir. What is the minimum micro biodegradable poly bag can be preferably? What will be the cost difference while comparing with 50 micron PE bag?
Okay, this is a very important question from a market perspective. Typically, if you make a 15 to 16 micron compostable bag, you can make it in the same cost as a 50 micron plastic bag.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question, sir. You have suggested that the bioplastics can be used for the food industries and for the thermoplastic packaging. But normally, if you go for all these food containers or food things, there is a certain norms that the mixing of the plastic material should be certain ratio and a certain virgin materials should be used. How do you define this bioplastics can be used in this?
So bioplastics is ultimately any other plastic. It is not, from a chemistry perspective, it's just a different molecule. It's very simple. So if you see PBAT and PET are very similar. PBAT is polybutylene, so it's a copolymer of adipic acid, terephthalic acid, and butanediol. PET is a copolymer of terephthalic acid and ethylene glycol. So the point is, ultimately, bioplastics are also plastics. They're not some different material. So they also, basic bioplastics also have food contact compliance. If you take PBAT or PLA or some of these regular bioplastics which are available, they are food contact compliant. But at the same time, when you make a product, if you start adding materials into it which are non-food contact compliance, then you start getting into a problem. So this is where that ultimately, whichever product you make, whether it's a plastic or a bioplastic, we have to do the studies which ensure compliance to migration and different food safeties, which has to be done irrespective of whether it's a plastic or a bioplastic. So bioplastic is no way different from a plastic in any of these things.
Thank you, sir. Ethanol glycol has more carbon footprint than petrol-based one. How the claim of bio-based ethanol glycol lower carbon footprint justified?
So what I mentioned there was ethylene glycol from both a petroleum and a biosource. Now, typically ethylene glycol, CH2, the chemistry of ethylene glycol, the carbon can come either from a petroleum feedstock or a bio feedstock. What I mentioned was, when you have a bio-based feedstock carbon, the carbon footprint or the material carbon footprint is lower because this carbon is fixed back into the environment in the same rate as which it was coming out. So if you refer to the last week's talk, you can remember that there was a carbon footprint cycle where when you make it from a renewable feedstock, then the carbon footprint, the material carbon footprint is lower as compared to a petroleum feedstock, because you are fixing the carbon at rates at which you are putting it out. That is why bio-based ethylene glycol has a lower material carbon footprint than petroleum-based ethylene glycol.
Thank you, sir. How can bioplastics can be seen in the use of the film packaging sector?
Bioplastics have a lot of applications in films. It can be used for products like carry-out bags, garbage bags, liner bags, but it can also be used for more specialty applications like mulch films, forestry applications, grocery bag applications, packaging, industrial packaging. It can also be used for applications in products like courier bags, mailer bags. So there are a lot of applications which in the film space which bioplastics can be used for.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, what is the advantage of bio-based polymer compared to petroleum-based polymer?
So bio-based polymer, the main advantage is because it is 2-3 advantages. One, it's sourced from a renewable feedstock. So the carbon footprint, the material carbon footprint is lower as compared to a petroleum-based polymer. Number two, because it's sourced from a renewable feedstock, it also creates a lot of security, food security for the rural agrarian economy, for the farmers, because it starts providing opportunities to sell your feedstocks into other applications apart from just food. So it creates sustainability, it builds security, and it also helps in ensuring that our dependency on petroleum based or fossil based resources is lower.
The next question is, what is the strength of the bioplastics comparing to our standard plastics?
It depends on which polymer. For example, if you look at PBAT, some of the properties like tensile strength or percentage elongation to break is extremely high as compared to LDPE. But if you look at PLA as a bioplastic, it's a very brittle polymer. So the elongation property is very low. So it's just different chemistries with each of these bioplastics. In principle, it is like how plastics industries were about 60-70 years back. So we are still trying to discover, understand the chemistry, understand the functionality of each of these different biopolymers, and then how do we mix, how do we reactively modify these biopolymers to be able to make a product which makes commercial acceptance in the market.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, what do you think are the challenge for in compounding the bioplastic comparing to the conventional plastics?
The main challenge in bioplastics compounding is we have to be very sensitive to moisture, because conventional plastics like polyethylene have very good resistance to moisture. But bioplastics, because they have the oxygen functionality, they are very prone to hydrolysis, they are very prone to heat, and they are very prone to shear. So we have to watch out on moisture, we have to watch out on the screw profile of what we are using for compounding. If we use a high shear screw profile, that would break down the molecular weight. And then the temperature, the processing window, which has to be maintained very closely, because if you move out of that processing window, you will start degrading the biopolymer before it is even compounded.
Sir, the next is, what is the difference between biodegradable and bio-based polymer?
So as I mentioned, bio-based refers to the beginning of life, which means the source from where the carbon is coming, and biodegradability refers to an end of life, which means once I use the product and I dispose the product, what happens to the fate of the product in that disposal infrastructure. So they are completely two different concepts. Bio-based means source. Biodegradable means disposal or end of life. You can have bio-based materials, but it need not be biodegradable. And you can have biodegradable materials, but it need not come from bio-based feedstocks.
Okay, sir. Can we use the bioplastic in textile industry?
Yes, we can. There are several applications. We can use it for packaging. We can also use it to make fibers. We can use it as a part of the product itself, or we can use it as part of the packaging as well.
Sir, we will take a few more questions because the questions are more, but we'll restrict to some few more questions. Is BOPP film developed for packaging applications or equivalent to BOPP film is available?
Equivalent to BOPP in bioplastics, we have something called BOPLA, which is biaxially oriented PLA. There are about 3 or 4 companies in the world right now who are doing BOPLA. There is no company in India, but you have a company called Evlon in Canada, and then we have Mitsubishi. We have one more company called Tagleef, who are the 3 main manufacturers of BOPLA films. Yes, but it is a, I wouldn't say it is a direct replacement to BOPP, but from a transparency perspective and you know, it comes very close to BOPP.
Okay, sir. Can we manufacture non-woven fabric from bioplastic material? Can you specify grades?
Yes, we can manufacture non-woven fabrics using PLA PBAT blends. I don't remember the PLA grades that we can use. I mean, I don't remember the name of the grade directly, but yes, there are. If you go to the website of NatureWorks, and it's very easily you can wade through the website and you can get information on non-ovens and the grades available. But I can also look it up and tell you, but I don't remember right now immediately off the top of my head.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, any bioelectrolyte master batch is available in India?
Sorry, I'm not aware of this.
Any bioelectrolyte master batch available in India?
No, I'm sorry. I don't understand. Actually, I don't know what a bioelectrolyte is.
Okay, sir. Just one more question, we will take it. How do you segregate biograde waste and PE waste? If both are recycled at the same time, could it work? If not, what is the way to segregate both the waste?
Yes. So usually, if you use biodegradable plastics, then it typically goes in for more like direct food contact or you know, organic waste stream applications where it gets composted along with the food waste. So there is a certain channel for collection and segregation which has to be different from conventional plastics. Now, when you're looking at a conventional plastic, and let's say at some point there is a mix-up between the conventional plastic and the bioplastic, then the question is, what does bioplastic do? And then again, it depends on what percentage. So if a bioplastic enters into the conventional plastic waste stream, it only acts as a contaminant, because a typical conventional plastics waste stream itself is not a pure waste stream. You don't get pure PET today. You don't get pure polyethylene. It's all mixed streams. So a bioplastic also goes into the stream as a contaminant, and this contaminant essentially behaves like any other contaminant. At this point, bioplastic acting as a contaminant is not a challenge, because the total quantum of bioplastics produced in the world is much lower than conventional plastics. It's less than 1%. But as the bioplastic production increases and as it starts coming into probably 10-15% of conventional plastics, which is going to take a long time, then this recycling or mixing could potentially create challenges, which we'll have to see how to address it.
Thank you, sir. We'll take 2 questions. The biodegradable nylon can be used in engineering applications with GF compounding.
So first is it's not a biodegradable nylon. It would be called as a bio-based nylon. That is one. Secondly, yes, we can use bio-based nylon in GF compounding, provided we create a clear chemistry between the fiber polymer matrix and ensure that there is enough interactions, and probably we might be required to treat the fiber a little before we do the compounding. But yes, in principle, theoretically, you can do GF compounding with bio-based nylon.
Thank you, sir. We have one more question that in Indian